fog coiled like pale serpents through the trees as Elara stepped from the train. Her boots sank slightly into the sodden earth of the rural platform, the kind of place where the timetable was a suggestion rather than a schedule. A thin drizzle kissed her face. The station, if it could be called that, was barely more than a wooden bench beneath a rusted awning. No station master. No other passengers. Just the hiss of the departing train and the wind whispering through the birch trees. She glanced at the faded letter once more. The seal cracked, the ink smudged with age. It was from an aunt she'd never met, summoning her to inherit what is rightfully yours. The address was as cryptic as the letter. Ebon Hill Estate, Hollowmere. No return address. No phone number. And yet, something had drawn her here. A dream that repeated night after night, filled with the sound of weeping walls and an ancient lullaby hummed by unseen lips. A horse-drawn carriage awaited her at the path's edge. Not a car. Not even a motorbike. The driver, a hunched figure in a long oilskin coat, didn't speak. He merely gestured with a gloved hand toward the carriage door, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Elara hesitated only a moment before climbing in, the interior dim and redolent of old wood and lavender. As the wheels began to turn, she watched the fog thicken, swallowing the countryside whole. They passed through a landscape that felt more dream than real. Gnarled trees with branches like reaching arms. Crumbling stone fences long abandoned. A raven perched on every gatepost, each watching her, unblinking. The road twisted like a serpent, always uphill, until finally the estate emerged from the mist like a revelation carved in obsidian. The house on Ebon Hill. It was vast, far larger than she'd imagined. Built in a style that predated everything modern. All pointed arches, gargoyles with flaking teeth and windows like staring eyes. The front door was black oak bound with iron, a grotesque knocker shaped like a screaming face mounted in its center. The moment she stepped out, the carriage rolled away without a word, vanishing into the trees. Oh no. Elara approached the door and raised the knocker. 3 slow strikes. The sound echoed through the air like a tolling bell. She expected a servant, perhaps some distant housekeeper with arthritic fingers and a sour expression. But no one came. The door creaked open by itself. She hesitated, then entered. The air inside was dry, the scent of dust and lavender stronger here, mixed with something older, mildew, candle wax, and iron. The foyer stretched high above her, ending in a domed ceiling painted with angels whose eyes had long faded to white. A grand staircase split the room in two, its red carpet faded to rust. Cobwebs draped the corners like lace. Elara. The voice was barely more than a whisper. Mail. Clothes. He spun around. No one. But a gust of air brushed her neck, cold and breath-like. Elara. She clutched the letter in her coat pocket, now feeling like a talisman. Who's there? She called out. Her voice echoed back, unanswered. Then a rustle, movement upstairs. Footsteps. Slow and deliberate. Curiosity warred with caution, but Elara was not easily frightened. She mounted the stairs, hand grazing the dusty banister, each step creaking with age. At the top, the corridor stretched into darkness, lit only by flickering wall sconces that shouldn't have been burning at all. To her left, a large door stood ajar. Inside was a library. The air here was thick as if the room held its breath. Shelves rose to the vaulted ceiling, packed with ancient tomes. The fire crackled in the hearth, although no one had lit it. A single red armchair faced the flames, and as she entered, it slowly rotated to reveal nothing. Yet the air shifted again. Books began to flutter on their shelves, one by one. Pages turned. A whispering filled the room, unintelligible, like prayers spoken underwater. One book fell to the floor with a loud thud. Elara. The voice whispered again, now from behind. She turned sharply and saw a tall mirror on the far wall. It hadn't been there before. In it, she saw not herself but a girl, young, no more than 14, in a tattered nightgown. Her eyes were hollow. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. Then the mirror shattered from within, the sound sharp and final. Elara stumbled back, heart hammering. The fireplace flared suddenly, casting monstrous shadows across the room. Something had awoken. The fire died all at once. One blink, and the hearth turned to cold ash, the room veiled in darkness so thick it swallowed edges, corners, and air itself. Elara backed away from the shattered mirror, crunching on glass that hadn't spilled into the real world. The books no longer stirred, but something unseen moved behind the walls. A steady, scraping sound like fingernails on stone. She fled the library. The hallway had changed. The corridor she entered no longer led back toward the stairs, but deeper into the house. Unfamiliar, impossibly long, lined with portraits of people whose eyes seemed to follow her. The faces were thin, hollow-cheeked, and dressed in styles centuries apart. Powdered wigs, Victorian lace, even medieval chainmail. Yet every single portrait bore the same crest. A black bird impaled by a silver dagger. She passed under a chandelier strung with dead moths. Then a sound. Soft. Towel-like. Weeping. Elara turned, every instinct on edge. It came from behind a closed door on her right, warped and blistered by time. The brass handle was cold as ice. She opened it slowly. A nursery. Toys lay scattered across the floor. A wooden rocking horse, a cracked porcelain doll missing an eye, building blocks with unfamiliar symbols. The wallpaper peeled in strips, revealing soot-darkened plaster beneath. In the center of the room stood a crib, covered in a sheer moth-eaten veil. The crying came from there. She crossed the room in slow, deliberate steps. As she reached for the veil, the temperature dropped. Frost bloomed across the crib's wooden rails. Her breath fogged the air. Then silence. He pulled back the veil. Only a torn stuffed rabbit lay within. It seems oozing something black and tar-like. She recoiled instinctively. A whisper tickled her ear again. She never left. Elara spun. No one. The doll on the floor had changed positions. Now staring directly at her, its remaining eye glistening wetly. The walls groaned. Then a sudden burst of sound, dozens of whispers, layered and overlapping, rising in urgency. Not from the room. From inside the walls. He fled once more. The corridor twisted, led her through places the architecture should not have allowed. Windowless parlors hung with crucifixes turned upside down, narrow servant passages with doors nailed shut, and finally, a spiral staircase descending into the heart of the house. Down she went. Each step groaned beneath her weight, as though it resented her descent. The air thickened with damp earth and the scent of decay. At the bottom she entered a stone cellar, vaulted, cavernous, lined with shelves of preserved herbs, bones and vials of things too strange to name. At the center stood an altar of black marble, carved with the same crest from the portraits. Candles flickered of their own accord. And on the altar a book, bound in leather that didn't feel like leather at all. She approached cautiously. The book snapped open. Its pages flipped with unnatural speed, finally stopping on a spread inked in blood-red script. Her name was there, written in curling letters that crawled across the parchment like live worms. A family tree bloomed beneath it, her line traced all the way back to Magda of the Hollow, 1666. The founder of the house. A witch. A name whispered by the walls. A legend whispered by her mother in bedtime stories, half joking, half serious, of an ancestor burned for consorting with things older than God. Elara had always thought it myth. Now it stared her in the face. Something moved behind the altar. She stepped back just as a figure emerged from the shadows. It was the girl again. The one from the mirror, 14, pale as milk, eyes blackened like burnt-out stars. Her feet hovered just above the ground. Her mouth opened, and she let out a soundless scream before vanishing like smoke on the wind. But she left behind something new. A key. Ancient, iron-wrought, heavy in Elara's palm. It pulsed with heat. Then a voice, not whispered but spoken, thundered through the room. Break the seal and the house will breathe again. The candles extinguished. Darkness surged. And when Elara climbed the stairs to return, they were gone. The way had vanished. Only stone. The house had sealed her inside. The stone wall that replaced the staircase was smooth, cold, and final. Elara pressed her palm to it, but it gave no answer, no secret mechanism, no hollow knock. The house had shifted again, not merely rearranged but rewritten itself around her, as if it lived, breathed, and chose. She clutched the iron key, its warmth pulsing like a heartbeat. Somewhere in the dark below, the whispers began again. Layered voices, some crying, others chanting, all in a language she could almost understand. The sound grew louder as she moved deeper into the cellar's labyrinth, led not by sight but instinct. and the key, which now throbbed in her grip like it yearned to be used. She passed through archways of bone, through doors that opened not to rooms but to memories. A ballroom where 100 faceless dancers spun in silence. A chapel where stained glass windows wept blood. A child's bedroom with a mobile spinning wildly above an empty bed. Everywhere signs of the past, her past. In one forgotten chamber, she found a painting beneath a torn velvet sheet. It was of a woman, young, beautiful, and utterly familiar. Hair the same raven black as Elara's, eyes wide and watchful. Her name was etched in Latin beneath the canvas. Magda Tenebris Hollow, Domina Domus. Mistress of the house. Her ancestor. As Elara stared, the eyes in the painting moved. Just slightly. Just enough. She tore herself away and pressed on. Eventually, the corridors narrowed and led her to a circular room lit by 7 lanterns that hung from chains above. In the center, a stone pedestal carved with arcane glyphs. Set into it was a rusted lock, shaped like a bird in flight. The moment Elara stepped inside, the key in her palm writhed, dragging her hand toward the pedestal as if compelled by something older than her will. She inserted the key and turned. The house screamed. A sound like metal being torn from the inside, walls moaning, timbers cracking as if the very skeleton of the estate rebelled. The lanterns flared blindingly, revealing symbols across the walls. Protective wards, blood sigils, and phrases in Old Church Latin scorched into the stone. Flesh binds what bone remembers. 7 sins seal the hollow. She who opens must feed the gate. Then silence. A door slid open. Beyond it lay a spiral descent, far older than the house above, carved from living rock. Elara descended, and the further she went, the colder the air became. Moisture wept from the walls. Roots twisted like veins through the stone. She felt as if she were entering the womb of the earth itself. At the bottom was a crypt. 7 sarcophagi ringed the room, each bearing the same crest, the impaled raven. Bones lay scattered across the floor, not human. Some were too long. Others had too many joints. A feeling of dread pressed on her chest like a weight. And in the center, a black mirror. Not glass, not quite. Its surface rippled like water seen through smoke. As she approached, her reflection did not mimic her. It stood still. And then, it smiled. Elara Hollow, it said. The voice was hers and not. You have come to feed the house. No, she whispered, her voice hoarse. I didn't come to. You were called, the reflection said. By blood. By name. By need. The hollow wakes every 7 generations. And now it needs you. The mirror's surface cracked and a dark mist poured forth, rushing around the room like a cyclone. From the sarcophagi, skeletal hands emerged. The guardians of the hollow, once priests perhaps now bound by bones and ancient oaths. They formed a circle around her, heads bowed. The voice spoke again. One among 7 must bleed. One must remember. One must remain. What does that mean? Elara cried out, backing away toward the staircase, only to find it gone. The stone had sealed shut. No escape, the voice said. Not until the gate is closed, or opened. Then silence. The guardians stared at her with hollow sockets. In one's hand was a ritual blade, black iron, curved and etched with runes that shimmered red. The air pulsed with expectation. Elara knew what they wanted. A choice. Not yet knowing the cost. She reached for the blade. Elara held the blade. Its weight surprised her, not in heaviness but in presence. It vibrated softly in her hand as though aware. Expectant. Behind her, the mirror pulsed, no longer a reflection but a veil, thin and quivering. Something moved behind it. Something vast. The guardians watched, motionless. 7 sentinels from centuries past. Servants of the hollow. One among 7 must bleed. One must remember. One must remain. She thought of her mother, who had never spoken of the hollow except in half-laughed stories. Of her father, absent and unnamed. Of the whispering dreams that had haunted her for years, only now recognized as memories not hers. This house had waited. It had called. And she, by blood, by name, had answered. I am not a gatekeeper, she whispered to the dark. But the dark whispered back. You are what we made you. Elara stepped toward the mirror. With each footfall, her name echoed, not aloud but within her bones. Elara Hollow. Last of the line. Keeper of the seal. The mist within the mirror surged, hands pressed against the other side. Too many fingers. Too long. Grotesque, infantile, hungry. A whisper rippled across the veil. "Open me." She raised the blade. Cutting her palm was easier than she thought it would be. Her blood fell in droplets onto the cold stone. The floor responded, glyphs flaring red and gold, ancient circuitry activated by flesh. The guardians bowed low. The mirror cracked from corner to corner. A wind rose, not of air but of memory. Elara saw Magda hollow, burned but unbroken, chanting in a forgotten tongue as villagers screamed and the sky rained ash. Children sacrificed in secret, fed to a gate that promised eternal protection from plague, war, time itself. Generations of her bloodline sealing the hollow anew every 100 years, trading sanity for silence. And now the cost came due. The mist in the mirror surged forward, and the veil split. A thing emerged. It had no name she could speak, not truly, though the syllables throbbed in her skull like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Wings without feathers. Eyes without lids. A body that folded inward and out again. It towered over her, but it bowed. "She who bleeds is worthy," it said. Its voice was not a sound, but a pressure behind her eyes. The guardians knelt. Then, in the flicker of a heartbeat, the being placed a hand, if it could be called that, on her brow. And she remembered everything. All names. All seals. All rituals. She became the vessel. The blade in her hand changed, turned to smoke, then bone, then iron once more. Symbols seared into her arms, glowing through her sleeves. The being looked at her one last time and returned to the mirror. The veil closed. The air fell still. And Elara collapsed to her knees, blood seeping from her ears and eyes, breath ragged, heart slow. But alive. The guardians stood. One approached. It held out a lantern, inside which burned not fire but a piece of the mirror, still rippling, still alive. He took it. A voice inside her now guided her steps. Not whispered, spoken clearly. Firm. Commanding. The stairs reappeared. He climbed. The house shifted again, but not to trap her. To accommodate her. At the top, the grand foyer waited, cleaned of dust, windows washed by some unseen hand. Candles lit themselves as she passed. The great black door opened before her without a sound. Outside, morning broke. A sky gray but calm. The fog had lifted. A carriage waited, but not the same. The horse was bone white. The driver had no face. Elara understood. She turned, looked back at the house. Looked differently. Not less ancient, but awake. Watching. She would ride into the village. Buy supplies. Learn what year it was. And then return. Because the hollow was breathing again. And it needed a keeper. Her. Elara Hollow, the last gatekeeper.